Welcome back to the Bucklesberry Lemonade Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and tonight we delve into the tragic and still unsolved case of Brenda K. Mills. You're about to hear a powerful conversation, but first, let's set the scene with an introduction to Brenda's story. Kinston, North Carolina, the summer of 1972 was thick with heat and whispers. Beneath the rustling pines, past the black asphalt lots and the flicker of porch lights, a silence fell on one family, a silence that never truly left. 19-year-old Brenda K. Mills was reported missing on August 3rd. Her clothing, her shoes, found in a vacant lot near her home on East Washington Street. And days later, her body, badly decomposed, was discovered in a wooded patch near the Kinston Airport. No arrests were ever made. The cause of death was never officially determined. But Brenda was so much more than another name on the wrong side of police tape. She was quiet, kind, loved to dance. She worked at a bakery and brought home treats that filled the house with the smell of cinnamon and hope. She was a daughter, a twin, a big sister to a little boy who still remembers the swing of the porch and the sound of her laughter floating through the screen door. But something else was in the air that night. A scream was heard. A dark station wagon was seen circling the block. And since that moment, the questions have lingered like humidity in the hollows. Did Brenda know her killer? Did the town? And if so, why has no one ever said a word? Tonight, we speak with someone who still carries her story. Mr. Linwood Mills, Brenda's baby brother. A man who remembers her voice, her scent, her sweetness, and the sound of that night. The silence still speaks in Kinston. We're here to listen. Now, let's join my co-host Tim as he speaks with Brenda's brother, Linwood Mills.
Brenda K. Mills. She is the oldest unsolved homicide in Lenoir County and the fourth oldest homicide unsolved in the entire state of North Carolina. Mr. Mills, I really appreciate you being here with us tonight. Are you ready to just dive in?
Thank you for having me, Tim. Yes, I am, and I thank you for having me and helping me to get the story out.
And it is our hope that in getting Miss Brenda's story out, that we can get some questions answered. We're hoping the right person hears this and we can get some closure. Mr. Mills, take us back to the summer of 1972 in Kinston. What was that like?
Well, as anybody that's from North Carolina or even from Kinston, it was hot. That part I do remember very much so. Of course, August of 1972 sticks out big time for me, but I just remember we were probably looking, I would say, some 100-degree days during that time. It was hot and muggy. I went to Hemmerwell Park a lot to the swimming pool with a lot of my friends to cool off. And the thing that sticks out the most in 1972, as I go back and reference back to, was how hot it was. And the time of 1972 is just so much different than today's time.
Absolutely.
Where we left our windows open and had windows fans. It was just a lot different time back then.
It really was. Tell us a little bit about family life on East Washington Street.
Our family life on East Washington Street as a 11-year-old, it was actually great. As a 64-year-old today, it was a much tougher life than I realized. We stayed in a challenged neighborhood on East Washington Street. I stayed literally around the corner from where I went to elementary school at Lewis School. And it was, it was just in today's environment, it would be called a questionable neighborhood. By then, I guess at 11 years old, I just didn't know that's what it was. But, we came from a challenged environment, a challenged neighborhood, and even a challenged, family life.
That's understandable for that time period as well. Now, Miss Brenda at that time was 19 years old, and she worked at Noble's Bakery, and she'd worked there since, I think you said August of 71, correct?
She was there maybe about a year or so before she passed.
Tell us a little bit about Miss Brenda, her personality.
The best I can remember about Brenda is I have certain memories of her, and then it starts to get a little vague because of 53 years ago, and I was 11 years old. The biggest thing that stuck out to me with Brenda was I can remember certain conversations we had and different things. She was more of an introvert. I would call her more of a follower than a leader. She has some challenges, mentally from the standpoint. I always thought she might have been dyslexic, but I wasn't. I'm just not for sure. But that's what I feel like now, but I'm not for sure about then. And the biggest thing that stuck out to me also was I think she was easily manipulated by good and bad people. And of course, the bad people take advantage of her, and they did. She was just, she was sweet. She was kind. Man, it just sticks out. I remember she talked, some of my conversations with her, she talked about having a family. She talked about wanting to be a mother one day and a grandmother one day. That might seem a little unusual for a 19-year-old, but she was like anybody else. She had her goals and aspirations, and she really wanted to have a family one day. Not necessarily in 1972 for her future. That's what she was looking for. And then, of course, I wouldn't say she stayed to herself, but she was more of an introvert, and we would have conversations. I enjoyed being around her because back then I would probably be more of a loner and an introvert myself. And so we had that in common. And we would talk sometime on the front porch. I went and visited her in her apartment, and we would talk sometimes. And then, of course, the biggest memory is her working at Noble's Bakery. And anybody that's ever been in there can remember that smell, man, and stuff. And she would bring me sweets, and she knew that would put a smile on my face because I had a sweet tooth. Some of the biggest memories I have of Brenda, and unfortunately at 64 now, going on 65, and I was 11, it's very discouraging not to remember what her voice sounds like. I can see her face. I can see our conversations. I just cannot remember what she sounded like.
Yes, sir. And that's very unfortunate. And Mr. Mills, y'all had a very large family. I think you said it was 11 total, between 9 and 11 total. I can't remember.
I was the youngest of 9, and Brenda was a twin, and she was in the middle there. And there was 9 of us. It was a large family. But the time frame that we're talking about is, though, it was just 3 of us, myself and my 2 sister siblings, and Brenda some would stay at the apartment some and stay with us some, and my brother, stayed at the home at the time. But everybody else had kind of, moved on and either got married. It was 9 of us, but we had shrink down a little bit, because of getting married and people moving out and moving on.
And as we start to move forward, of course, we know that a lot happened on August 2nd, 1972. Can you begin to walk us through the evening of August 2nd and tell us what your last memories were of Miss Brenda before she left the house that night? I know that we talked about your family was preparing for church, I believe it was.
Yes. The very last memories, and these are the ones that are vivid to me because of what happened. But the very last memories of Brenda was earlier that afternoon, it could have been around 5 or so. Me and her were sitting in the swing on the front porch, and we were just talking. She had just gotten back from one of my other sister's house up in the Raleigh area, and she had been up there. Can't remember if she was up there for a couple of weeks or a couple of months during the summer, helping my sister out. And she had just gotten back, and she had talked about wanting to go out, dancing with her friends and stuff. She had been up there for a couple of months, so she just kind of wanted to have some fun and stuff. And we joked about it because I remember her saying, and she said, "And you got to get ready for church." And she kind of laughed about it because we went every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night visitation, revivals. I mean, we were there. And then what happened later on, of course, I can hear her hollering through the house, "It's time to get ready to go to church." And she said, "You better go get ready." And so I got up and got ready. We got into the car. It was my father, my mother, myself, and my two sisters got into the car. And Brenda had walked around to the driver's side, and I was behind my father. Behind him, he was driving. I was behind my father. And she literally stood right there at the window where me and him was at. And he just asked her, he said, "Now, you want to go to church with us. You ought to come on and go to church with us." And she just said, "I just got back. I really would like to go have some fun. And I got plans to meet some of my girlfriends, dancing and stuff." And the most vivid memory I have is when he put it in reverse and we backed up and we drove off. I can still see her standing there because that was the last time I ever saw her.
Yes, sir. And that, of course, this would have been on a Wednesday night. A time frame,
yes,
we'd have been around 7:30 around this time. And
somewhere in there, because we would have left around 7, somewhere in there, to drive out to Highway 258, which is where the church was.
Yes, sir. And unfortunately, I know that memory stuck out for you as well as your father and mother as well. And it looks like, just going from the notes and the time frames, around 8 p.m., neighbors saw Miss Brenda leave y'all's house at 207 East Washington Street to go to the American Legion hut, and she would have walked there. And we know in mapping this out, from the house at 207 East Washington Street to the American Legion hut, we're talking roughly 7 minutes by foot. And it would have been 1 minute by vehicle. And that's important because as the story progresses, as we go on in time, that'll become very evident. But she goes to the American Legion and she begins dancing with some of the servicemen. Tell us about the service guys that were coming in and out of the area, because Kinston was known at that particular time. A lot of servicemen came from that area to the area.
Oh, yes. It was, I can even remember 1972 and on, really through when I got my license in 76 all the way into the 80s. Before the bypass was put in on 24, the servicemen took Highway 258, and they always drove through Kinston just to go home on weekend furloughs. And, of course, they always came to Kinston. I think American Legion had dances on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday nights. And, of course, they just didn't go to Kinston. There was other American Legions in other cities, but that was just a place that they went. And also locals, by the way. I mean, there was witnesses that also saw her speaking to some of the local guys there. I don't have any names, but just were some witnesses. She kind of just spoke to a lot of people and danced, with a lot of people. But the majority of there was military guys, mainly from Camp Lejeune, Seymour Johnson, and Fort Bragg. They would come, but I would probably say more Camp Lejeune. But they came from all three areas. They would go there. And so she was singing. We got a very good timeline. I mean, I can literally shut my eyes and just visualize her walking to the American Legion, arriving there around 8. And then all of a sudden we have timelines, that goes from 8:30 to 9. It just keeps right on going, where witnesses have stated that, she had talked and danced with several locals and military guys, and was seen in the parking lot talking to locals and military guys there too. I mean, and she was seen by locals walking by in that parking lot. So there's a very definitive timeline that we have from the time that she left the house, went to the American Legion hut, and even walked back before disaster hit, before she got home.
And let's go back to the American Legion hut just for a minute.
Okay.
We know she was seen inside talking with some
Yes.
servicemen, and she was also seen outside talking. But two in particular, they were nicknamed Indian and Ace, correct?
Correct. And back then, I know this now, but I didn't know that then. Back then, the military guys hardly ever, according to authorities, they never used their real names. They were always AKAs. And so there was we called one, whatever his name is, he was called Indian, and the other guy was called Ace. And then there was a couple other ones. One was named Chopper, and then one we just don't know the name of. We never got the AKA named on. But we also found out that they could have went to Greenville to an American Legion if there was one there, or somewhere else, and they would have used a different AKA. So they kind of used those names differently everywhere they really went. But in Brenda's case, it had boiled down to seem like the majority of witnesses that were interviewed, it just seems like Indian and Ace kind of stuck out from a time frame of her being seen inside, dancing a couple of times, and being seen in the parking lot with her and some other local girls talking to them too in particular. And again, that was anywhere from 8:30 to 10. We got about an hour and a half time frame that we can kind of follow her around the American Legion hut on the inside and the outside.
And it looks like sometime around 10:30 to 11, Miss Brenda was seen leaving or walking along North McElwain Street back toward the house on Washington Street by a neighbor. And you had said
Yes.
they had called out to her and she didn't answer, but she seemed mad or upset. Go back to the American Legion and tell us, you had mentioned that somebody stamping, because, back then they would stamp your hands to show that you had access and had paid your cover charge. But inside the American hut, if I remember correctly, you said it seemed as if one of these servicemen might have grabbed her or pulled on her arm or something along those lines. Is that correct?
According to one of the employees there, the witnesses at the American Legion, they witnessed her, of course, dancing and talking with locals and military guys. But on one occasion, she happened to turn around and look, and one of the military guys had grabbed her arm, and I think if I remember correctly, she kind of jerked it away. And then this witness saw them, not in a full-fledged argument, but just in a little small semi-argument, and then it just went away. Mm-hmm. But that kind of stuck out to that employee, especially after they found out what happened to Brenda. So when she was interviewed, she thought that she remembered that because it just stuck out to her that it looked like there was an argument. And look, back then also some of these guys, if they were drinking and different things like that, they had a tendency to be aggressive. And if I had to guess and speculate, that's what I am assuming happened. They just probably got aggressive. She wasn't in the mood for aggressiveness and kind of jerked away. But that was one of the things that stuck out in my notes that I took of what we found out that happened that night.
And given Miss Brenda's personality, with her being shy, she wouldn't have known how to necessarily deal with that type of aggression. It's not something she was used to. We also know that same night, one of the speculations is that maybe a serviceman was there with another woman, and prior knowledge that Miss Brenda may have dated him or went out with him, and then all that played circle. And that could have been one of the reasons that she could have left mad or upset. Is that correct?
Yes. What we're hearing from when you go back and look at all the notes that I took from all the witnesses, which was a lot of them, it was almost 60 of them back then, and you start putting the puzzle together, you figured out that during the time frame in there, Brenda had dated one of the servicemen that I think it was Ace. I think this particular case, it was Ace, had dated him prior a couple of times. She was no longer dating him. Really, at the time she went on August 2nd, she really wasn't dating any of them. but she had dated him. And what had happened is he was there that night, and I think his girlfriend was there that night. And somewhere along the way, we're hearing that she found out that him and Brenda had dated, and that could have been part of the argument. Again, that is speculation. It's just kind of putting the puzzle together with all these witnesses and their statements. That's kind of what I'm thinking might have happened.
And just to be clear, when we say date, we mean just that. Maybe one date, maybe two dates, not like they were dating or going together in the form of a relationship. We mean one, maybe two dates, a dinner, or something along those lines. We don't mean dating as in a relationship.
Correct. She wasn't really, that I remember, I don't quite remember her ever having what I would call a boyfriend that she was just head over heels in love with. She dated a couple of them, and obviously it didn't work out with a couple of them, and she kind of moved on. And that's the take that I got on it, and the take I'm reading through all my notes as I look at what all the witnesses said that happened that night.
And now at this point, we've got a neighbor who was sitting on her porch who called out to her. She didn't answer, but she seemed mad or upset. At this point, she's close back to 207 East Washington Street, y'all's home. And we know at this point, everything intensified.
Yes.
I want you to take me through this at this point now.
Okay. So Brenda, with witnesses and stuff, are leaving the American Legion. We can follow her all the way down Michael Wayne based off of witnesses. And the very last witness that saw her was right at the corner of Michael Wayne and Washington, about a house back. One of my neighbors that lived across the street from us on Washington Street was visiting the neighbor on Michael Wayne Street. So there was two neighbors sitting out on the porch that witnessed Brenda come by. And one of the neighbors hauled out and says, "Hey, don't you think you need to be getting home?" in a jokingly way, from my understanding. And Brenda didn't respond. Mm-hmm. And the way she was walking, the neighbor could tell that she was upset about something. And so she passes that house. They see her get to the corner of Washington Street and Michael Wayne. She turns the corner, and within seconds, really, they all witnessed, they heard dogs barking, but they really didn't think that much of it. And then one of the neighbors that was sitting on the porch, one of the sons of the neighbors on the porch, he just made a comment later on to investigators. He said he thought he heard someone yell for help, but then I think he dismissed it because it was such a light sound. He just didn't think that much of it until everything unfolded. So she turns the corner and goes on to Washington Street. And unfortunately, just a few feet in front of her, disaster was waiting for her. And
at this point, her own twin, to take us through that, because the vacant lot is right next door, and the vacant lot from the home is how many feet would you say?
Man, I used to just go outside and play. I mean, you can literally.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. If you do Google search on that, you'll just see how close those two lots are together. They look a lot closer now than they did then, because as a child, I thought it was a great big lot. And then you find out just how small it is. But unfortunately, she turns the corner, and there's a driveway there to the empty lot. And then, of course, there's a driveway to our house. Well, she turns the corner, and obviously someone was waiting there in a station wagon at that driveway. Based off the witnesses of my two sisters, my two siblings that was in bed asleep, they heard noises. And so when she walks up, I kind of have to leave it there because we can stop it there. But then I have to switch over to my sister's accounts of what happened. So they're looking out the window. They heard noises, looked out the window, and they saw a station wagon sitting there at the driveway of the empty lot. By the time they looked out, someone had already gotten out and had grabbed Brenda and threw her into the lot and jumped on top of her. One of my two sisters said she did not know it was Brenda at the time. So if anybody can imagine this, just imagine silhouettes. All they saw was just figures. They didn't know who it was. They knew it was the shape of a station wagon. They knew it was a man and woman, but they had no idea who it was. And the girl which is Brenda, hollowed out, "Please stop. Please don't hurt me." She said she heard that, and he was on top of her, and then I think she hollered for help. So my two siblings left the bedroom, came to the living room, and told my mother. And another one of my sisters was an older sister was looking at TV. And my mother dismissed it only because she thought they were just trying to get out of going to bed, which is what a lot of mothers even think nowadays. It's just an excuse not to go to sleep. And she says she didn't hear anything, so she sent them back to bed. So by the time they came back around and went back into the bedroom, it was still going on. Whatever was happening, there was still scuffling and some hollering going on. And next thing you know, the next account of events was, my two sisters stated, was this person picked up the other person and threw them in the back of the station wagon.
And Miss Brenda was very petite.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, so. She was small and petite. And where my part comes, the only part I have in this is I was up in the front room. And as we stated earlier, we're talking August, we left our windows open with screens in them. I just heard talking. I didn't hear scream, yelling, nothing. I raised up and I saw a silhouette of a station wagon come by. And it really just didn't come by real fast. It just drove by. That's all I remember. I didn't hear no more noises. And that's the only part I play in it from that witness standpoint. It was only the following morning did we all start putting the puzzle together.
Now, we talked about the station wagon, and we're going to dive into that a little more here in a little bit. At this point in time, it's one of these things to where you've got a very vivid memory of Miss Brenda as y'all preparing to go to church. Your sisters have a very vivid memory. They didn't know it at the time, but they would learn in a few days that was Miss Brenda hollering for help or screaming for help. So these are two very haunting things that have stick with you. I mean, you just don't forget it.
It really did. It affected, I cannot stress now that I know now what it did to our family. It's even to this day. I've got family members that don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. I suppressed it for years. My two siblings, they never even discussed it with each other, they said. It was just it's not an easy thing to talk about. It's easier for me now, but I suppressed it for years. And so it is a life-changing event, and I would say it would go away, but it doesn't go away. It never goes away.
Never.
And it really impacted our family big time in ways people will never know. I mean,
it had to have, absolutely. And it's like you said, in a manner that none of us will understand unless we've lived through it. As we go back, okay, now we're at August 3rd, and sometime around that evening,
the very next day, yes.
Your father, he files a missing persons report. And
well, first, a little bit before that was we got up, and I noticed my father we just noticed Brenda didn't come home.
Right.
And my two siblings had got up and told my father, because my father was already in bed when they got up the night before. My father was already in bed, and they described what they saw when I was standing there with my father, and they described to him what they saw. So my father went outside, and I followed and just kind of tagged along with him, and we went over to the lot. And what happened is as we got toward the middle way of the lot and back of the lot, we see a pair of undergarments and a pair of sandals. So I cannot remember who verified it, but somebody in the house, it might have been one of my older siblings, but somebody in the house verified that it was Brenda's. Those were Brenda's sandals. And they thought that was Brenda's undergarment. Then that's when you could say chaos hit. I mean, that's when panic kind of set in a little bit. And that's when my father called the KPD and then also filed a missing persons report, mainly because of what my siblings saw and then what me and him found in the empty lot.
And KPD, or Kinston Police Department, they came out and took photos.
Yes.
Okay. So
there was a detective that came out. I guess once we called in and told him what we saw, he came out and took photos of the sandals and undergarments. And I think he might have bagged them or what, but whatever he did, he bagged them and put them in. And then I think he took those particular things back to the police department I'm assuming, and just going into an evidence log, more than likely.
Yes, sir. So
now this is on Thursday, still early in all of this. This is just the very next day. We still don't know anything. This is just that Thursday.
And what a time frame did everything start to really come together? We're around August 5th now, right?
Yeah, that's when I guess you could say reality set in a little bit. Not full reality, but reality when a motorist passing by out on Shackleford Road. I used to call it Airport Road. It was just a nickname, but it was Shackleford Road. Reported finding a body. He saw a rabbit come across in front of him. He stopped and he looked over and he saw something. He got out. This is according to him and his witness statement. He got out and he yelled a couple times and nobody answered. And the closer he got, a little bit closer, and then unfortunately, without getting graphic, smell came into play. He knew exactly what he thought that was. He didn't even go no closer. He got back into his car. He went to his sister's house, and they called the sheriff's office. And that's when the sheriff was dispatched out there to Shackleford Road.
Now, at this point, we know the coroner was called out. We know Miss Brenda was sent to Chapel Hill for autopsy. Take us a little bit through the ME report and some of the confusion and the frustration with the family as this unfolds.
Yeah, well, as this unfolded, the sheriff's department was called out there, and the sheriff at the time called the SBI in. This is where they came into play because he's got a dead body in the county. And keep in mind, they still hadn't put together, this was Brenda. It was decomposition really settled in from the shoulder up, so they couldn't identify. So they went by the rings and the dress that she was wearing. And this particular body had a dress and rings, but no underwear. No undergarments. And so you start putting the puzzle together, but as you stated, the SBI is called out there, then the ME is a medical examiner is called out there, and he does his initial examination, and then her body is sent to Chapel Hill, I think, for another medical examiner to examine the body. And what had happened was there was a couple of death certificates that were issued, and the first one was probable strangulation. She did have a broken jaw. I think there was a bone or bones broken in the neck. I think on the death certificate, that's where they came up with probable strangulation, probable homicide. And they kept saying the word probable. Now, this is what we're told this later on. So the information I'm giving you is down the road. We did not know any of this at the time. And so the SBI also took photos of the crime scene, of the dress, the rings, and that was all sent to their lab and, for evidence. And of course, as everybody remembers, in 1972, there was no DNA. And so that couldn't be ran. And so what happened with the medical examiner was he would not definitively put homicide. He said the body was too decomposed and he could not even determine whether she was killed on Washington Street or whether she was killed out on Shackleford Road. He just doesn't know. The body doesn't tell them whether she died in the city or the county. And so the medical examiner, about a week or two later, after his initial death certificate, he changes that to unknown. And that's where some confusion and different things, that changing of that death certificate really caused some things down the road to happen. That was unfortunate that we didn't know anything about. We just didn't know all of this was going on. My father would just check in every once in a while, and they just said they were working on it, but they didn't have anything to share with us at the time. I'm only finding this out, really within the last 6 months of finding that out now.
And that's happened. And that's due to her case being reopened. And as we talked about earlier, we know that they're still working on this, and we're glad that they are. I'm going back up just a little bit. We know the ME report was issued in September 72 on the 2nd. September 22nd, an amendment was made, and this is when it was put unknown cause of death or it lists unknown cause of death, but probable homicide. And this is where
Right.
we talked about her rings and the Band-Aids and the small amount of blood underneath the fingernail collected, but not enough for anything because there was no DNA testing at that time. So we go to March 1973, and in the ME report, we get a requirement for homicide, and this is where everything starts to stall. In 1973, in December, another SBI agent is assigned to reinvestigate, and so we know that they're making the effort, even though they've got some confliction of jurisdiction and things like that. We know they're making the effort. They reviewed the autopsy. He noted the fractured mandible, which would have been consistent with a beating. The bone broken in the neck would have been her hyoid bone, which would be consistent with strangulation. So now we go to July 23rd, 1974. And at this point, the later opinion of the medical examiner is that Miss Brenda did in fact die from manual strangulation or could have been beat to death. There's your contradiction from all the earlier findings. That's correct, right?
That is correct. And unfortunately for us, he had told when it was re-examined, like you said, reopened and re-examined, he never went and really amended the death certificate the way it needed to be amended.
That's right.
Because that caused even more chaos 10 years later. I mean, and we can talk about that in a minute because I didn't want to jump full 10 years. But that just caused just mass confusion. And I will give the authorities full credit for this. I mean, Absolutely. They interviewed a total of 59 people the first time. No, 52 people the first time and 59 the second time. Now, of the 59, most of those were re-interviewed from the first time. So, and then, of course, it was recently reopened again by the Lenore County Sheriff's Department as a cold case, back in December. And they interviewed 19 people, maybe somewhere in there, I think.
And that would have been December 2024, right?
Yes, that would just be the reason. I mean, they did a very good, I think 18 people, they did a very good job of,
Absolutely.
They did the best they could with the info they had because as you saw in the notes that we talked about, I'll tell you about 100% of the suspects are deceased.
Exactly.
95% of all the witnesses that were interviewed are deceased. The body was cremated, and so that doesn't leave much room for DNA. It was just, it's just.
Let's talk about that for a minute, Mr. Mills, and then we're going to get into the suspects whose names keep coming up over and over. The reason Miss Brenda was cremated was simply because between funeral directors and things like that, they thought it would be best for the family if she wasn't shown. That's correct, right?
The two reasons we were given was there was no way that you would want to identify, right? I mean, they were saying it's not recognizable. And the second thing is, again, without being graphic, was you really couldn't put her in a casket and have a funeral service because of the smell. There's just nothing they could have done about it by then. It would have been too bad. So the recommendation was cremation.
Take us through at this point. We want to start talking about some of the suspects. And we mentioned earlier, we know we had a lot of AKAs used. One person or one name that has come up, or a couple of names that have come up several times, are the names Indian and Ace. If you would start taking me through these suspects, and they are deceased, they are not here anymore. And we do feel, I'll just go ahead and say it, Mr. Mills, we do feel there were a lot of people in the community who know exactly who's responsible for Miss Brenda's passing, and they just never came forward. And we'll get to that as well. But as we set the stage, start taking us through who these suspects are and what we know about them as far as their relation or connection to Miss Brenda.
Yeah, well, the number one suspect by far would be this AKA Indian, who was also a Marine. So he was out of Camp Lejeune. We did not know it at the time, and Brenda did not know it at the time. But, he was known to have a temper, and he was known to, be a drug user, especially, unfortunately, not everybody that was in Vietnam and come out during that time, but that was a time that drugs became more prevalent and started just hitting America pretty strong, was in the late 60s and early 70s. And so he was known by other witnesses, not speculation, but witnesses that witnessed him doing drugs and would tell the authorities about he had a real bad temper, different things like that. And of course, again, Brenda would not have known that about him at the time. We just find this out, later. But by far, he was the number one witness. And would you like for me to go into any details as far as what he told other people?
Absolutely. I full on want you to go through all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the reason we feel like Indian is the number one suspect, he told, the authorities interviewed, I would probably say maybe 5 to 10 witnesses stated that they were told, and they were witness of a friend that were told that he told several people that he had beaten Brenda to death while he was on drugs. And he said that consistently to several people. He says he has a vague memory of it because he was strung out on drugs. He didn't know it. The one thing that even with Indian, the one thing that the authorities can't figure out, I cannot figure out, we just don't know what the motive is. Because as me and you talked, before, to do a crime like this, it was specific, it was brutal, it was horrific, and whoever did this had every intention of killing her. There was no just sexual assault. There was none of the intention was madness, so to speak, of just killing her. And that was just something that happened. We just don't know why. That's the biggest thing. But just based off of witnesses, then he turned back around. The same Indian guy turned back around and threatened at least 4 or 5 other witnesses that if they were to ever say anything about what he told them, that they would be next. That's why we kind of hone in. And, I personally, off of speculation, feel like it was Indian who did it more than likely. I cannot speculate because I just cannot even figure out the motive behind it. Just not for sure. She was not dating him. She was not seeing him. So we're just not for sure what the motive, would be behind it. But that was.
It almost seems.
That's who.
It almost seems, and again, speculation, and I'm trying to paint a picture without being overly graphic, because she was found missing her underwear. She was found with her dress up. I think it's possible an attempt was made, and for whatever his reason, because he was under the influence or whatever, he was not able to, and at that point became enraged, because we know, given what you've told me about your sister, Miss Brenda, she's a good girl. She didn't drink. She didn't do drugs. This is just not her personality, not her nature. And I honestly, it seems like he probably was wanting more from her than she was offering. And that could have led to that. Again, speculation on my part. But we do know for a fact by his own admission, he had been seen driving a station wagon that he claimed was owned by an acquaintance in Greenville. That's correct, right?
That is correct. Yeah, but he had, we do know he had, according to witnesses, access to a station wagon.
Access, that's right.
We just don't know. We just can't pinpoint it. Again, it's hard to investigate it now because everyone has passed. The time has gone by.
And as we move forward, another one of the possible suspects goes by, at this point, the nickname Ace. And
yes.
Ace.
And Ace was out of Fort Bragg.
Right.
I think he was Army.
He was U.S. Army, and he's described as having 2 very different personalities, as yes. was Indian. Indian, by his own admission, had claimed, we know that he had attacked or beat at least 2 women. One of them was pregnant, but Ace, 2 different personalities, heavy drinker, alcoholic. He also possibly had access to a station wagon at this time as well. Tell us a little bit about the interview and things concerning this suspect, Ace?
Yeah, this suspect, again, like I said, he was in Army. He was described by witnesses as basically being a heavy drinker. Never heard much on him on the drugs part. It was mainly just a heavy drinker. But they said he had a double personality. Some of the female witnesses that we interviewed was talking about he could be one of the nicest guys in the world and just turn on you on a dime and then become very belligerent. I mean, he could be very also has witnesses have stated that he also has beat on a couple of women after 19, because we're describing now how they were, during the time frame and afterwards and what they became. Brenda more than likely would not have known any of this.
That's right.
And I would have to say that at the club, they probably were about as friendly and as nice as you could be, if I had to guess. Like most of them are, you really don't find out about them until later on. And I think she might have dated Ace just a couple of times, but then she just moved on. It didn't work out. I just don't think, maybe the personality is not for sure, but then she moved on and he found another girlfriend, and then he would take his girlfriend to the American Legion hut sometimes. And I think we talked about that earlier, where she found out that he had dated Brenda and stuff a couple of times. And so was also known as, like I said, he could just be the witnesses stated that he just a split personality. He could go from 1 minute to the next. Speculation on my part, and I think maybe the authorities to some is that Indian had to have some help, did not do all this by himself. And this is where my part, speculation, I feel like Ace probably came into play, helping Indian out on Shackleford Road, just based off the information that I have.
Because we do know that they knew each other. They were familiar with each other. But Ace made the comment to a former girlfriend. He had came home and made the comment. The girlfriend made the comment he was white as a ghost, and he said something terrible had happened. And he was reported as saying,
Yep.
And he
lied to authorities.
Yes, he claimed that he had lied heavily to the police, and he was reported as saying, "Oh my God, what have I done, or what made me do it?" And this was after the discovery of Miss Brenda. Another serviceman comes up, and I believe he was a Marine. He went by the name Chopper, and he was seen talking with her that night. And then there's a fourth military person with an unidentified female, who was witness to, take me through this part. They were seen laughing, and this is probably because Indian has admitted that he struck a woman, and they had witnesses, and then he claimed he ran off into the woods. But this was not Miss Brenda. This would have been another woman, correct?
I think so. I think that's what he was talking about. And the other thing with Indian is he started dating this girl after all this happened. I don't know the time frame. This girl was interviewed because authorities found out that was her boyfriend at the time. Mm-hmm. This girl was interviewed, and she stated that they were driving from Kinston to Jacksonville. She was in the car with Indian, and Indian told her that he was high on drugs and that he had beaten Brenda to death. And she said he got into detail on what happened. Unfortunately, she would not go into detail with the authorities other than the fact that he said that he had beaten her to death because he was high on drugs. So I guess his motive is he didn't know what he was doing. He was high on drugs. The other thing that she said is that she asked him, well, if you don't mind, can you take me back to Kinston? So they go to Jacksonville. He tells her the story. So she's asking him to take her back. As he's taking her back, he told her the same thing that he's told several. And he says, now, if you ever tell anybody that I told you that story, I will take care of you too. I think it's how she worded it. Mm-hmm. So he threatened her also. But she never, when she stated that he went to detail, she never did say what those details were. And I'm assuming they never could get it out of her, or it was never given to me as notes that I could take. So Don't know the details, just not for sure. But for someone to tell that many people, that is another reason why. And by the way, some of the people he told were actually locals. Mm-hmm. Some of the girls that supposedly were friends with Brenda, we found out later on they weren't friends at all, but they were friends with Brenda. He also told them that he had killed Brenda when he was high on drugs, and that and that if they ever said anything, they would be next. And so those locals that we know, or at least were witness that he was told to, they took it to their grave. They never came forward. They never said anything. And who knows how many people he actually told.
And talk a little bit to the comment, or one of the stories that's been told is that after Miss Brenda's discovered, Ace and Indian both are told they need to leave because Miss Brenda's been discovered. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's an amazing story to me now, because it was supposedly a friend of Brenda's, supposedly one that she went to the American Legion hut with quite a bit. I just don't know her name, but she went with Brenda quite a bit. She was a local. And the amazing part about this story is about how cruel people can be. Brenda's body is found a little after midnight on Friday, which makes it Saturday morning, right? I think which would be the 5th.
That's right.
The majority of people that go to American Legion hut on a regular basis, they were all there that Saturday night, including Ace, Indian, that Brenda's friends, all of that. And a witness that was interviewed witnessed Brenda's friend telling Ace and Indian that y'all better get out of town. Y'all do know they found her body today. And that just is amazing to me, because this friend took it to her grave. Whatever she knew, she never said a word. She took it to her grave. And so now how much did that work? I don't know, because as time went by, they all faded out, right? I mean, eventually they got out of the military in less than a year after all this happened. So, of course, they stopped coming, and they went back to their respective states, wherever they lived at, and kind of moved on. Now, some of the friends that were there that were told all these things stayed in Kinston most of the time the rest of their life, and they just took it to their graves. Never came forward, never said anything, which is really unbelievable to me.
It's truly unbelievable, because it looks like, just, I'm on the outside, okay, but I believe it looks this way to you as well. It's almost like you've got, I won't say an entire community, but everyone associated with the American Legion hut, the pool room, all that, they know. They all know.
Yes.
But they have made a decision.
They had to know.
They had to have known. And they have made a decision to just keep quiet. We do know that both Indian and Ace had violent tempers. We know that. But it's like you said, within a year or so, these guys are out of the military and back to what respective states they went back to. So where's the fear at this point of retaliation? Why wasn't things said at this point? And that's hard to wrap around. We also know
it really is.
We also know that in 1974, the governor at the time issues a reward, a $3,000 reward.
Yes.
Nobody bothered to claim. One thing I wanted to kind of back up and go back to, let's go back to out by Pool Road, out by Green Acres Trailer Park. Talk about that, about the witnesses who claimed to have seen two men out that night.
Yeah, there was a witness that was driving on Shackleford Road. We don't know what the reason they were out there. They were heading to wherever they were heading. We're not for sure. But they rode by. It was one of the ones that was interviewed, and they basically said that they saw two men. When it was reported of where they saw them at, it was basically right where they found Brenda's body at. And so they saw two men in two different cars on the side of the road, and they didn't have their shirts on, and they had dog tags around their neck. So this witness is also deceased, but they witnessed that they were standing on the side of the road, and that one of them, the one that was closest to the road, I think was, as this witness went by, he turned his head so he could not be seen as the witness was going by. The witness didn't stop. They slowed down. They just kind of went around him. And that was basically what they said. So two guys said they looked like they were in their early 20s, had dog tags on, no shirts on, and that was out on Shackleford Road. So to back that up a little bit, Ace from witnesses, and Ace stated this in his interview, is that he was driving a vehicle that had broke down, and he literally stopped, I think he said, at the Smith & Barr place to use a phone. Of course, remember, this is 1972. Probably looked a lot different then. Used a phone to call someone to help, and it was near someone he knew that stayed at Green Acres Trailer Park, and that was out there near Shackleford Road. And so, but they never could figure out how to tie all that together. They just said that night, they feel like it was the same night that his car broke down. He called for help to help him with the car. And so then it gets murky from there. It's very hard for authorities to follow what happened in that time period. That's just from witnesses talking. Of course, that's the best that they could do. That's the best that they could get out of people. Because remember, even back then, people that they talked to would only tell you what you asked them. And then they at times seemed like they tried to sidetrack the answer, so to speak. So they weren't very forthcoming with the answers at all.
And let's elaborate right here about this, because like you just said, one of the main burning questions that we have is how the two military guys who are not from around here, so to speak, I'll say suspect or potentially take Miss Brenda's body to this area. How did they know that? And then in a later interview, Ace makes the comment that his car broke down right around this same area. And this is, the witnesses are saying, we rode by and saw two military guys, no shirt on. We could see their dog tags. That puts two military guys in that same area right around the same time Miss Brenda, or I hate to say it so like this, but right around where Miss Brenda would have been placed. It puts two military men in that same area. How did they know to be out that way? And that's where we speculate. Did somebody in that trailer park, did the station wagon get parked in that station or in that trailer park? Who's there to help these two guys? We're seeing a station wagon at different points. We know Indian had access to a station wagon. We know from another interview, it was possible that the Ace may have had a station wagon. But if we go back to August or to 1974, when Ace was re-interviewed, he makes the comment that a woman told him that he had been seeing that the Indian had admitted to her that he took Miss Brenda's life, right?
Yes. He had a girlfriend, I think Ace did. And I think the witness to the girlfriend stated that he had nothing to do, when he was re-interviewed, nothing to do with Brenda's death. He was adamant about that. But he said all he was told by the girlfriend was told, when the witness stated that he was told by his girlfriend that Indian admitted to her that he killed Brenda and that he was high on drugs. Now, that's what Ace stated. Again, unfortunately, by the time it's reopened again in December, everybody basically has passed. So it was very hard to verify any of this. So we're going off the actual notes that happened back then, and they're very vague notes. There's just not a whole lot to go on, because the notes I have will mention something like this, but then it doesn't dive any deeper. So just not for sure how deep it was dived into. Just not for sure on that.
And we know that the Indian was pressed on the question, had he told anybody that he had took Miss Brenda's life?
Yes.
But he never denied making the statement. Only thing that he would really say is that he didn't remember making the statement. And then he would go on to say, well, maybe I made the statement just trying to impress a female.
That's basically what he basically said, was he would never acknowledge he made it. Then he finally came back at the end and said, if I did make that statement, it would be because I was going to try to press women. girls he was being around. He said, if I did. So it was a kind of a way of admitting it, not admitting it statement, so to speak.
And we do know that at this point in time, just to get my thoughts correct, we know that back in the 70s, we know that Ace was re-interviewed. We know that Indian was re-interviewed. Indian was interviewed in Texas, and Ace was re-interviewed where?
He was moved to California.
He moved to California. So both of them.
And then one guy was interviewed. Remember, we were talking about there were two other ones?
Chopper and an unnamed.
Now, the Chopper thing is a mystery in itself. Nobody knows the name, and he basically, according to what we read, just disappeared. I mean, they couldn't find him. They never could find out his real name. They couldn't track him down. As a matter of fact, from what we're hearing, he wasn't seen again after they found Brenda. Mm-hmm. So it was only Ace and Indian and whoever this third guy was. We do know that the third guy that was interviewed stayed in Ohio. We just don't have an AKA and we don't have a name. For some reason, it was left out. So in my notes, I just don't have anything on that. But he was re-interviewed in Ohio, and he stated in his re-interview that he just didn't think that he didn't know Brenda. But he was talking about Ace's personality, and he is the one that stated Ace could have a split personality. He never admitted to him that he did anything to Brenda or anything, but he had the personality to be violent and to be violent toward women. But that was basically to the extent of it. Was the third one. He did dance with Brenda that night, maybe one dance or so, and that was it. I think that was just more of an acquaintance. The unfortunate part is we just don't have a name or AK. We just know it was in Ohio. We know Ace was in California, and we know Indian was in Texas, and that was basically it. And Indian is the one that actually, I think, told the story about his car breaking down in his re-interview. I think it was Indian was the one that was actually telling that story about how his car broke down and stuff. The authorities just thought it was suspicious when you look at where he was at near Smith and Barrow calling someone, and then I think there was a friend maybe out at Green Acres Trailer Park. Just look at the area. We're talking out there by Shackleford Road, and that was where they got a little, but they never suspicious that, but they never could tie anything together. Mm-hmm. So it was they call it going down rabbit holes. They just said we couldn't go deep enough down the rabbit holes to tie anything together. Basically, what they were saying.
And I meant to mention this to you earlier when we were talking about this. When the witness describes seeing the two individuals beside the road with the dog tags and their shirts off, and it's a smaller car, light-colored car, they made the mention that on the front of the car, their headlights caught the tag and that it was a kind of blue on white background.
Right.
In digging around, there were states in the 70s that required tags on the front of the car and the back of the car. California and Texas both required you to have tags on the front and back of the car. And at that time, they were, in fact, blue with white background. So that right there, I mean, there's so many things that put these guys all around this. I mean, they're...
Yes.
I mean, it's one of those things that's so obvious. I think it's obvious to local law enforcement. I think they full on suspect, but they couldn't put the finger on them. Nobody would admit to it. Nobody would say, hey, yes, I did this. We're not sure if lie detectors were taken. Unfortunately, DNA was not viable then. The thing of it is that we feel like we've talked about, there's enough people in the community, they know who done this.
Yes. Now, whether they're still alive or not, I'm just not for sure. But what I tell you, what I was hoping was, and maybe on this podcast, maybe if somebody hears it, what if one of the locals' children, grandchildren, what if they say something to their children or grandchildren? You just never know. What we do know is that the locals that were left, it was mainly employees. I mean, it wasn't, I think most of Brenda's, well, I call them so-called friends, I think all of them have passed. The best of my recollection, they're deceased. So again, unfortunately, more than likely probably took it to their grave. And so what we're hoping is, who knows, they might have said something. They might have said something to their own siblings or something. You just never know. What we do know is they, whatever they knew, they held it within and just never came forward, never said anything. It's just, it's a little bit mind-boggling, to be honest.
It really is. And the other hope that we have too is that if somebody's out there listening to this podcast and the names Ace, Indian, Chopper, they ring a bell to you in another state, perhaps a family member, a child, a friend, perhaps something was said and, you know, like you said, they've passed, but can you get it off your chest? Can you let the Mills family have some closure here and say, hey, yeah, we were told this happened. We believe it happened, just so that there's some closure.
Yes. The unfortunate thing with them too is they did the same thing. They never confessed and they took it to their grave.
They took it to
their grave. And I think from my understanding, they both got married, afterwards. Actually, I think both of them were married multiple times, but I'm thinking one of them, I'm not sure, had children and grandchildren. I'm just not for sure. But when you look at when they passed, the years that they passed, I mean, they lived, most of them, they lived to about 50, 50 or 60, which is a lot longer than they allowed Brenda to live at 19.
Yeah, this sweetheart of a person just taken way, way too soon. And, at the beginning of the interview, we talked about this, and you and I have talked about it several times leading up to the interview. Miss Brenda wanted to be a mama. She wanted to be a wife. She wanted to be a grandma.
Yeah.
And this was taken from her. And I realized at the time this happened, we're dealing with a lot of teenagers and a lot of 20-some years old, but regardless, enough time has passed. If you know anything, now's the time, because this is real. This happened, and it's still sending ripples through the community. I mean, when you sat down and went through all this, when they reinvestigated everything back in 2024, I mean, this wasn't a Band-Aid ripped off. This was a full-fledged wound that was gaped open again. And it's just time that we had some closure to it. Mr. Mills.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Go ahead.
And I would like to say one last thing is, I would just say to the community, regardless of her background, regardless of whatever she did in her life, it really just doesn't matter. She was a human being who was only 19 years old, who never owned a car, who never got her driver's license, who just wanted to eventually become a mother and grandmother. And somebody decided to take that away from her. And, that's the biggest thing is she just wasn't another face. She just wasn't another number. When I look at the fact that she walked to work, she walked to her apartment, she walked to the American Legion, she walked to our house, because back then people did walk. I mean, but she stayed in this bubble of this square here, and that's all basically of life she got a taste of, was that bubble. She never got a chance of anything else because someone decided to take that. And when you go back and look at who the possible suspects are, not only did they go on with life, they eventually had families that they took away from her.
And she just completely denied it all. And not only that, but if these individuals that we're speculating did this, what was it, the first time, the second time, the third time? How many other times has this happened that we just don't know about? And that possibility is there.
I often thought of that. Yeah, I often thought of that because when I think about the brutality of what happened to Brenda, you have to be a specific type of person to be able to do that, whether you're on drugs or not. It doesn't matter. It has to be in your DNA and personality to do something that brutal. I would just be shocked if that's the only time that's ever happened.
I would be too. I really would.
Before Brenda or even after Brenda.
Well, Mr. Mills, as we wind up this interview, again, thank you for taking time to share Miss Brenda's story. And I'm going to ask you a very pointed question right now, and it's an emotional question. If you could say one thing to your sister Brenda today, what would it be?
I guess if I had one thing to say to her, and I'm talking about strictly from a brother, just me, my standpoint, is that I'm sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you more. I'm sorry I didn't go to your apartment more and visit. I'm just sorry. Because when they're gone, they're gone. You don't get a second chance. And I lost my first chance. I just don't think. And the other thing I would say to her is, I'm sorry that I suppressed this for so long that I didn't want to think about it. Because if I had just questioned things earlier, 30 years ago, maybe when DNA first come out, maybe it could have been different. I just waited too late. And that's one thing I would tell your audience. If anything ever happens like this to you, don't wait. Don't wait. That's the mistake I made. I waited too late. And I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that. I know that was hard for you, and I appreciate you sharing that with me and with our audience. Folks, we've reached the end of our interview. Again, I'm going to make the plea. If you know anything, if you can share anything at all, please reach out and contact the proper authorities, and let's give the Mills family the closure they need. Thank you, sir. Stay right here with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.